Welcome to the Creativity, Thinking, and Education podcast with your host, Patricia Rose Upsack. Today we'll be talking to the remarkable Mary Jo Bulbrook. Good morning, Mary Jo.
Good morning. How nice to connect with you today.
Well, we have so many interesting people that are talking, and you and I just met in Philadelphia, which I loved Philadelphia.
Yes, we had a great time, and I felt that was a spiritual connection between you and I, and it really helped serve for some of the things we're going to be talking about today.
That's true. Well, and the thing is what's fascinating to me is, it really was very synchronistic, and as you know, I'm very much into synchronicity, but Virginia Satir has been a mentor that I've never met for years. Years and years ago when I wrote my master's thesis, she was part of it. It was really important to me. And then you and I had gone out with Jackie, my friend, and we had done all kinds of things, and we didn't have any communication about Virginia Satir. And then at the last minute, boom, we start talking about Virginia Satir, and I'm in a state of shock because it was you have no idea how important she is to me, and that you actually knew her and worked with her was just wonderful.
Yes, it was wonderful for me as well, and actually the whole process of reconnecting with the influence that Virginia had on my personal and professional life has been very, very intense this year, starting in May of 2016. And there was a 100th year celebration of Virginia's legacy in life at Vancouver, British Columbia in June of this year. And this is what spearheaded her coming back into focus with full time and through inspiration, both with now with you and with Virginia, that we were led through some of our professional colleagues that I work with. But I'll tell you a little bit about that later.
Okay. All right.
As it fits in.
Sure. So tell us first, because I tend to get really involved and then I forget. Tell the people listening, our audience, how they can contact you.
All right. I'd love to do that. My email is maryjo, MaryJo, at energymedicinepartnerships.com. That's maryjo at energymedicinepartnerships.com, or they can contact me on Skype. And the name is Bulbrook, BULBROOKMJ. So the Skype interface is Bulbrook MJ, or you could call my cell, 919-923-2409. I'm in North Carolina.
Do you have a website?
Yes, I do. The website is www.energymedicinepartnerships.com.
Okay. And I have to say, you're such a fascinating person. I think we probably need to go through a little bit of history of your life. You work with shamans, you go to Peru, you've been to Australia, New Zealand, and was it Newfoundland or Greenland? All over the place. So tell us a little bit about your background before we get into talking about Virginia.
Oh, I'd love to do that. And I think a characteristic point will be if I start with when I was getting ready to go to college, I had been registered at a university for studying physics. And about a month and a half before I was going to start college, I was awakened in the middle of the night and I heard a voice, and the voice said I was to be a nurse. And I had never wanted to be a nurse in my entire life, but I felt that through such a strong influence, I decided to pursue it. So I went to Mount St. Joseph on the Ohio and spoke to the Dean of Nursing. And I said, I am interested in coming to your school and studying to be a nurse. And she said, well, we've already picked our class for next year. And I said, well, I still would like to be considered. So she started asking me about my activities in high school, and I shared a few things with her. And I said, oh, I was on the National Honor Society as well. And she said, okay, you can come in. But I had only been on the National Honor Society one semester, and I didn't even get a chance to add that. So I thought that was curious. But then what happened is, so she said, okay, I'll start the process to get you enrolled. And I said, oh, by the way, I don't have any money. And she said to me, oh, my goodness. She said, I know what, I'll put you on a psychiatric mental health grant. And that's what she did.
What exactly is that?
And that was in 1968, I think, is when I started my bachelor's degree, bachelor's in nursing. And so I was on a National Institute of Mental Health traineeship for psychiatric mental health nursing. And that really then is the influence. I mean, I never would have considered being a psychiatric nurse, but that is how the foundation started. And then that is actually how I made the connection with Virginia, because after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I immediately went for a master's degree. And I started working at Cincinnati Children's Hospital in pediatrics. And I was actually kind of overwhelmed with nursing. I thought I've had enough of that for a while. I'm going to do something different. So I did my master's degree in Montessori education. I thought, since I'm interested in children and how they learn and how they process information, this is what I want to do. And it was one of the first master degree program in Montessori education in this country. And the person who was my teacher, she invited me to be, after I graduated, to mentorship in the Montessori education program and to continue pursuing it. And I said, well, I'm really a psychiatric pediatric nurse, and I'm going to go back into nursing, which is what I did. But when I went to start working on my master's degree, or after I completed that, I then started a doctorate degree, and it was in college teaching, and also because I've been an educator all my life and interested in pursuing things. And the reason why I'm sharing with you the first part that I did about hearing voices and following spiritual guidance, that is really what my life has been. And what happened to me and how I connected with Virginia Satir is on my doctorate degree, the major professor that I had was a social worker. And he said that he supervised some of my clinical work. And he said, Mary Jo, you need to study the work of Virginia Satir. You and she would have a lot. I know you would like her a lot. So I said, okay. And anyway, she came to Fort Worth, Texas, where I was living and working. And she came to the hospital there and interviewed 3 different clients. And I was absolutely intrigued by how she did what she did, because it was totally different from what the field of psychiatry was, and I was mesmerized by her work. And after that, I said after that first, I don't know if it was 1 day or 2 days, I said to my friend, his name was Bill Burney, and I told him, I said, I feel that I've been meant to connect with Virginia Satir, and I'm going to be part of her life, and I have some things that will help her in her work. And I said, isn't that the most grandiose thing you had ever heard? Because I was like 20-some years old, and why a young kid would have such a grandiose idea. In my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have made a story up like that. But it all came true within a year's time.
Wow.
I became very connected to Virginia, and I did help her launch her international teaching network in Park City, Utah, when I was connected to the University of Utah, and launched her training of the university for becoming more fully human. And then the interesting thing about that is I moved, and I was very involved in helping her set up her organization, which was a worldwide network. She wanted to start, instead of her just doing what she did, creating an international teaching framework. And so I actually administered all of that and put together the university-related framework for that piece. And shortly after that, we worked closely together, I want to say maybe about 9-10 years. And then I started becoming very interested in energy therapy and started pursuing that and became very active first in therapeutic touch and then touch for health. And after that, healing touch. I was both helped write the training materials with Janet Menken, and then took that material to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Peru, Chile, throughout Canada, the U.S. Because I heard a voice when I was a young woman, when I left St. John's, Newfoundland, where I was coordinator of the graduate program in nursing, that I was to live near an international airport because I was going to be doing a lot of traveling. and that's exactly what has happened in my life.
I like your guides because they're very specific.
They are very specific. And the thing is, when I was looking for a job, when I knew I needed to come back to the United States to help take care of my father, my mother had died about the year before, and I said to my sister, it's time for me to help support him and make it easier to you. And so I'll bring our dad, who was in Ohio, with me wherever I find a job. And so I heard a voice again, and this time, though, I actually saw a picture where an angel took out a bell out of a tree. We lived on the ocean and across from Bell Island in St. John's, Newfoundland. It actually, the name of the city was Paradise, which was a small community out of St. John's. So anyway, I saw an angel take a bell out of chapel on the hill, because we lived on a hill, flew somewhere, hung a bell in a tower, and said, this is where you are to live. And I said, well, could you be a little more specific than that? I don't know what that means. And so then I meditated again, and I heard a voice that said, you will interview at 3 places, and the third place is where you're going to live. And I said, okay. So anyway, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill became the first place I was going to interview. Then it got moved to the second place, and then it got moved to the third place. So when I came to interview for the job here at the university, it was to be in charge of the psychiatric nursing program here. I went into the office, had I gotten the job, and I looked out the window, and that was the vision that I had seen, the bell tower, and that's where the angel had hung the bell. So I go, isn't that curious? Well, they didn't offer me the job, and I kept saying, I don't understand that, because those 3 different visions that I had really seemed to indicate that this is where I needed to be. And what I heard was, when I meditated and prayed again, is that it was a spiritual test for me. And it was a modern day
just so you know, I hate those.
Yes, right. And it was, come sell everything and follow me, and you'll have to just trust that this is right. So I did it.
Wow.
And that's how I got here.
Well, I think that's lovely. Okay, so because you're like me, we could both talk forever, and then we won't, get to the things that I absolutely want to do. Could you tell us what I've discovered? And of course, at first it surprised me, but it shouldn't. when I talk about Virginia Satir, a lot of people go, who? So I really want you to tell our audience who Virginia Satir is and the basic description of her work.
Okay. Virginia Satir was born in 1916. She passed in 1988, and this year, in 2016, in June, we celebrated 100 years of her legacy. So Virginia started out as a school teacher, and she wanted to know what influenced education for children. What influence? She said it had something more to do about them just being in the classroom and teaching them. Right. It had something to do with what their life was like in the family. So what she did is she started going to her children's that she taught home with them. And she began to see the dynamics of their life is really what influenced how they learn or where they ran into problems. So as a teacher, she began to teach every level of education, including special needs children, etc., in every age group, because she wanted to understand how at different ages do children learn and what are family dynamics like. And then after she did this for a while, she said, I'm beginning to understand that the learning process is more about the family dynamics. And of course, there wasn't a field called family therapy at that time. It was primarily pharmacology, because she was active in the 1960s. And that's when pharmacology and management of illnesses became very much focused on the discoveries in medicine. And so she was contemporaries of some very, very famous, prominent therapists. She went in to get her degree, her advanced training in social work. So she was a social worker by training. Right. And she got all the difficult cases that nobody else could handle. And she would do things that were extraordinary, that were out of what the norm is. And at the time, social workers did not prescribe any medicine. So she was really dealing with the family dynamics. And one of the new things that I've been focusing on is articulating a theory of her background in her training, because the term in the mental health field at the time was psychosocial therapy, but she really is a social psychotherapist. And that sounds like a small change, but it really is a small change.
Actually, it doesn't sound like a small change to me. I understand
it is a big
completely.
Change. And she actually hadn't been, and I wrote a paper and presented it at the International Society for the Study of Energy and Energy Medicine this past September, where I reformulated a theoretical description of Virginia, her life, and her work. And one of the things I want to tell you about it, so she worked with every illness condition. She worked throughout the world, and I don't remember exactly how that happened, other than people saw how talented that she was, and she was doing things differently than what everybody else was doing.
And what she did worked. I mean, I think that was the big thing. Yeah, the main thing is what she did had a profound effect on families and on school systems and on, so a lot of people tried to copy her, and they had a really hard time doing it because that's why I'm asking you, she wasn't really very good about writing down exactly what she did, because sometimes what she did was different each time.
It was. And that's why a number of the people who became part of her network, she had a group that she called the Beautiful People. And what she would do, she would invite people who got excited about her work. And most of the time they were either educators or mental health professionals of all different kinds, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, nurses, school teachers, administrators of hospitals, et cetera, people from all walks of professional life who had something to do with individuals began to look at what she did and how she did it and how they could duplicate it. So she really was one of the foremost leaders in the evolution of family therapy.
Right.
And family-centered care, when I was real active as a psychiatric nurse, family-centered care was just starting, where care primarily was individual-oriented. Either when you had a problem with a student, it was this child's illness, not a family system problem. This also came true with when people were entering the world, birthing, and I used to work in obstetrics, and began to look at a family orientation to the birthing process as well as dying and the ending of people's lives. So I studied Virginia, and we became friends and mentors, and I helped promote it through the university affiliations that I had. And that's what was predicted when I first met her, that I was going to take her material and help create a venue in the academic community and to begin to document what she did. And I did this for the cornerstone, the founding of her international training program.
Okay, so for our audience, because I like to make things kind of basic. I know that sounds silly, but it's because I like to be able to, it's like I'll take something complicated and then I will find a way to break it down into basic components, because you can always build on that. But if you don't have the basic understanding and foundation, then it makes it kind of crumbly. So for our audience, can you give me, and maybe you can't, maybe she doesn't have one, but can you give me the basic description of her work, like, what that you learned from her? What are the basic descriptions of Virginia Satir's work?
Absolutely. I would love to do it.
Oh, yay.
She is best known for her work on self-esteem.
Yes, that's what my master's thesis was on.
Yes. And whole person learning. So the words even give you some ideas what it's like. Mm-hmm. She also focused on what she called family reconstruction, which was looking at what the history was of an individual family experience in growing up, and then what needed to be done to alter the direction a family was going to go in rebuilding the foundation. She was known for your many parts, that she would look at all aspects of a person's life. She focused on the 5 freedoms. These were criticals. And congruent communication. She is very, very well known.
Okay, could you tell us what are the 5 freedoms?
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. And what I'm looking for is I'm going to read to you her description of, I put together a postcard of the 5 freedoms. And
maybe what we'll do is we'll try to put that on the podcast so people can see it. It'll be maybe at the bottom of your bio. We'll put see if we can get the 5 freedoms on there.
Perfect. Let's do that. And one of the main things about it is that to really create the opportunity for really being clear about what is right for you, what is right for the individual, rather than doing what other people expected us to do. That's one of the critical things that I would say about Virginia, is to find your own voice and to express what you wanted to do that defined you and your life, rather than being coerced to live out somebody else's dream for your life. And one of the things I'm seeing to tell you about a classical Satir piece that was called, that'll give you an idea of how different she did what she did. And she was called in a state mental hospital to help with a patient who had been screaming constantly, and the staff could do nothing with her. And of course, it was becoming very obnoxious and very difficult for people. So they called Virginia in to see if she could do something to help with this situation. So what she did, and I saw her demonstrate it, it was an absolute riot. She took a large wad of cotton and stuck it in her ears. That you could see it was hanging out of her ears. And then she wrote a sign, and the sign said, "Your screaming is hurting my ears, and I would love to talk with you, but you have to stop screaming in order for that to happen." So what she did is she went into where the person was screaming with the cotton in her ears and her sign, and she held her sign up close to her so the woman could see it, and she continued to scream, and then Virginia walked out. And then she waited a few minutes, and then she walked back in with her sign, and I think it was only either 2 times, maybe it was 3, but I think it was 2, the woman stopped screaming, and she started telling her what was wrong.
Yeah, see, I love that. She's amazing.
That's what she was.
Thank you for joining me here at the Creativity, Thinking, and Education podcast. You have been listening to Mary Jo Bulbrook talk to us about the remarkable Virginia Satir. This is part 1, and we will be listening to part 2 on our next podcast. Please visit us at happyteachershappystudents.com. And if you find value in this podcast and the message that we are trying to spread, then click the subscribe button and give my show a review. I'm so excited to be able to share the timeless awareness of all of these amazing speakers.